guys, we're gonna do a crowd photo. Turn your flashlights on. Turn your flashlights on. Yep. All right, guys, we're gonna do it twice. Ready? 1, 2, 3. All right, guys, one more time. Ready? 1, 2, 3.
Can I get a shoe shine, please? How you doing?
Good. Welcome to FanX.
Yeah. Like, this is crazy. I've never been in one of these things before.
This is your very first one. And why did you choose Salt Lake FanX to come to first?
It was close. It was pretty close.
That's wonderful.
Here.
How's everybody treating you so far here in Utah?
Pretty well, like a regular Mormon.
Now, it's not your first time here because you shot some of Maverick, the show here.
I think so, yeah, in Utah, yeah. In the Monument Valley that's filled with water.
Yes. Yeah, exactly. So, we're so excited. One more time, guys, can you please give a huge round of applause, everybody, for Mel Gibson FanX. I've been told some funny stories. I was told, you have to tell us if it's true, that your sister, she's the one that put your acting audition and got you go to an audition. Behind your back, you didn't know. And the night before the audition, you got in a fight. And you attribute that when you went to audition, that helped you get your first role. Is that a true story?
Well, it's a little rearranged, but I mean, somebody's taken that and put some ellipses in it. My sister was indeed instrumental in my career. And she thought I was kind of a goof, and she thought I would be well suited to performance. So she put an application in, spent the $5, taught me a couple of Shakespeare speeches, and I went out and spat them out, and they took me. Then I got 3 years of free tuition from it in the art, acting, and all that kind of stuff. So, and of course, then I got into a bar fight with a rugby team, and you know, I had a big mouth. And so I ended up the worse for wear, you know, a fat lip, a thick ear, a broken nose, you know, the whole deal. So I went into, I drove a friend to an audition, a guy named Stephen Bisley, for a film called Mad Max. I drove him to the audition. And I was sitting in the waiting room, and the girls in the waiting room said, "Boy, what happened to you?" Because I look like a pound of hamburger, you know. And I said, you know, I told her some bullshit, and then she said, "Wow," and she took some Polaroids of me because I was so disfigured, and she said, "We need freaks in this movie, come back when you heal up." And I said, "Okay." So I waited about 3 weeks until it was all healed up, and I went back in, and she said, "Who are you?" And I pointed to the Polaroid, and I said, "That guy." And they said, "Oh, go in and talk to the director." And I went in, he said, "Tell me a joke." I told him a joke. And he said, "Okay, can you drive?" I said, "Yeah." So I got the part.
That's amazing.
Very weird.
Okay, now we have to talk a little about Mad Max and then Road Warrior. It was amazing. It's one of the people, they love the movie Road Warrior. And the director, we were told, George, he said that he told you he never wanted you to smile during Road Warrior, but every once in a while he said he wanted like a Mona Lisa smile.
Yeah.
Was that difficult to do? So that way it could be interpreted maybe as a smile or maybe not.
Yeah, he said, "I want you to play him like a closet human being." And I thought, okay. So you had to get some kind of warmth out of the guy, even though, you know, he didn't kind of show it on the surface. And I think it came across. There was something happening in there that was like, you know, the guy was a human being under all the trauma of the post-apocalyptic, you know, PTSD world he was in. So, you know, he actually, he said, "Don't give him too much. Man of few words." It's like the man with no name who doesn't say anything, you know. So, worked for Eastwood.
Yeah, absolutely. Did you, then also he said in an interview that when he told you about the role for Road Warrior, that you cut your own hair and your eyebrows and did your wardrobe to come up with that character. Was that your own doing?
Well, yeah, they wanted me to do it, but then once I started, the hair and the makeup people took the scissors out of my hand, so we'll do it. Let us do it. We'll fuck you up. And I said, so I let them. They kind of did the lawnmower cut and ripped a piece of my eyebrow out.
That's amazing. And that was one of the first, that movie here, that's really what introduced you to the American audience, The Road Warrior. They loved you for that. We still do. And my mom's actually in the front row. When it came out on VHS, she was in a very conservative area. She would go to the local store and she would rent it and hide it in her coat and come home and we would watch it. And it's her favorite movie, and it's amazing, and we absolutely love it.
Yeah, all those people in black leather had fairly nasty connotations. And that was the idea, you know. I remember that film, they actually told the extras, when somebody dies, they told the extras, drag the body off like you're gonna desecrate it. And that was their intention.
Now, then you moved into, you, of course, celebrated director. We love the movies that you've directed. And it's been told that when you're directing, that you like to sometimes do humor, and that you will, like when you're doing Braveheart, you would sometimes do an Elmer Fudd voice to direct them. And did that break the tension for the cast to do that? Or?
Yeah, of course, I think so. I think it does. And I think, actually, even in the thickest drama, I think you need to be aware of the humor of situations. I think people are laughing. It's not necessarily because it's screamingly funny, but because maybe they identify with some aspect of truth. And so the humor is a very important part of any story, whether it's funny, sad, tragic, whatever it is, because if you don't laugh at the people, you certainly won't cry.
Excellent. And Braveheart is amazing. And that is your passion project. Yeah, you guys love Braveheart. And you wanted to direct it, but you did not want to act in Braveheart.
No, well, I got the script and I read it and I thought, yeah, it's pretty good. And I thought it's kind of a cool story and I kind of turned it down. I said, nobody does these big period epics anymore. And it was, I went for a couple of years and let it sit there. And then somebody said, what do you want to do next? And I explained to my assistant, I told him the story. And I got into the story. I said, and then there's this low angle and this thing with the swords and the horses and, you know. And I was telling him all this stuff and he says, that sounds really cool. I said, yeah, it does, doesn't it? So I went back and he read the script and he said, that story you told me, it was like you kind of were making the film. Because that's, what you told me isn't exactly on the page, and I said, really? So I read it again and I thought, wow, he's right, I've been thinking about this. And I thought, I went to Alan Ladd Jr., who was the executive in charge of that script. He was at MGMUA and he got fired. And he took 2 titles with him. He took The Brady Bunch and he took Braveheart. I guess he liked B movies. He took those away. And Alan Ladd Jr. was a remarkable guy. I loved him. And he was literally the son of Alan Ladd, the actor, right? But Laddie mumbled. And you know, and I used to get a lot of laughs out of saying, you know, well, like, you know, Alan Ladd Jr. once told me, and so I asked, he said, do you want to do this film? I said, yeah, but I want to direct it. And he sort of looked surprised and he said, like that. And I said, great. And then I got the gig directing it, and I was trying to cast it. But I actually thought I was a little too old for it because Wallace himself was about 25, but I was already close to 40. But, you know, we got away with it.
Did you find it a little more difficult to direct yourself? Or is that an easier thing to do when it's your, because that's your baby and you're acting it and directing it? Is it a little bit different for your own self to be directed?
Well, as an actor, when you're directing a thing, you're far less indulgent with yourself as an actor because it's just like, well, we got to get the whole story here. And somebody says, you know, we had the first assistant director called David Tomlin, who was a legend. This guy had been at it for 50 years, and he was this English guy. And he couldn't turn his head because he was all stiff, right? And he used to talk like this. You know, your movies now, Father, you know? Oh yeah. And I forgot where the story's going, but just know that, you know, he'd say, well, you know, you better get into your bits now because, you know, everyone else has done their bits, so you better get into your bits. I'm like, all right. So I hop in and I do that speech, you know, on the horse and riding around. And I'd come back and I'd say to David, Tom, I'd say, how was that? And he'd say, geez, I'm bloody British and I'd fight the fucking English. So, it was pretty funny, but far less indulgent. But I have to tell you, for about 3 months after, you know, 6 or 7 days a week, it was a 105-day shoot. I was like really physical. I was planning the shots and doing the whole thing and acting and everything. I'm very physical. I had to be put in a rubber room and just sit there and drool for 3 months. I couldn't even have a conversation with anybody. I was so overwhelmed by the workload. So it gave me gray hair. I never, look at this shit. And so I never actually did anything that strenuous ever again.
Okay.
So it's a mistake to act and direct in something. So when I direct, I usually just direct other people.
Yeah, nice.
That's enough.
Absolutely.
You wear your pajamas to work, you know?
Now we have to shift gears a little bit. We have to talk about the beloved franchise of Lethal Weapon. It's amazing. And we've been told, and we have to know, because you would be able to tell us if this is true. We were told that you were being courted for Die Hard, and that Bruce Willis was being courted for Lethal Weapon, but you both rejected the roles and then took the other roles.
I think there was some kind of transposition like that. I remember reading the script for Die Hard and going, crawling around in a fucking vent? I mean, that's like Mission Impossible or something. I mean, Barney, you know. But not the purple dinosaur, but the guy Barney who used to crawl around. And, but eventually, you know, I took the Lethal Weapon film. It was kind of fun because what it did was it took usually, like there were a lot of films about these kind of guys, these kind of two-dimensional kind of guys that go in and save the day, you know, and they're tough and you know, and they go, we'll get it done, you know. We're gonna cure you of the disease, you know, that kind of shit. So, but this was one of those guys who actually was psychologically like not all there. So I thought that was kind of interesting. That he was, that he had these flaws and he showed these weaknesses that sort of had, it was still kind of two-dimensional, but it had an edge of reality to it.
Well, there's a lot of people actually attribute that film to helping them with their mental health.
Oh yeah? Yeah,
because the character was, you know, like you said, he was deeply flawed, and he ends up finding a purpose to continue on,
sure.
And that has helped so many people, and we love you for that, for bringing that for so many people.
You know, he's an ex-serviceman, and a lot of those guys, and my heart goes out to those guys. They have PTSD, and a lot of them find it hard to cope when they come back from the experiences they've had, and they can't sleep and they can't adjust, and it's and there's ways to deal with it, and a lot of my heart goes out to the veterans and stuff who suffer. That was a classic example of that, I think early on, and you know, back in the First World War they called it something else, and then they called it shell shock, and then they called it, you know, battle fatigue, and then, you know, now I don't know what they call it, just plain nuts, I guess, but I remember talking to a guy who was, he was a Navy SEAL, and he was with the FanX program, and they used to just put him in black pajamas and drop him behind enemy lines in North Vietnam and get him to do hits. And he used to just go in there by himself, and he told me all about his experiences. And this guy definitely had some issues, so I kind of tried to reflect what I saw.
So Richard Donner said he wanted tension between you and Gary Busey on set. And so he would come up to you and tell you, Gary stole the last waffles. And then he would go to Gary and says, Mel took all the waffles, so you don't have any waffles. Is this a true story? And who took the last waffles?
I hate waffles. I didn't give a shit. I don't know. I don't know about that. I never heard that before, but
really?
That's a good story.
Oh, I love that. Now the final fight between you and Gary Busey, they wanted to do something. They wanted the fighting styles that have never been on screen before.
Right.
And so they taught you guys to do fights, and it was one of the most difficult shoots. I think it was like 9 days or something to film that fight scene. How difficult was it to do that with Gary Busey? Because it was wet and cold and all that.
No, it was freezing cold, and they had a fire hydrant going on us the whole time. So I was eating molasses, to keep the engines going. And we did indeed we did Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu.
Yeah.
And we did capoeira, and we did something called Jailhouse Rock, which is a really, really interesting martial art that developed for infighting in small spaces, and it was the black people in the pen, prisoners in the pen, developed this thing called Jailhouse Rock to sort of do combat for small spaces. And I found that really interesting. And there were these two guys who knew all of it. These two guys, and they were lethal little people. And then there was one of the Gracies, the sort of the patriarch guy of the Gracies, Horion Gracie, was just new in the United States then, and was teaching us Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. And in fact, there's a kind of a leg choke at the end of the film that people are like, whoa, this is the first time we've seen that. Now everybody does them,
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, it happens at home,
And that was at that time was one of the longest shoots for a fight scene, because usually try to do it 2 or 3 days, but they stretched it out for so long, but it's absolutely amazing. And did you guys realize when you were filming that you were capturing that lightning in a bottle, because it's become such a beloved franchise here?
Yeah, we did 4, and there's the 5th one is written. And it's interesting, it's been held up for one reason or another. There's always issues with these things, why it's being held up. Of course, my dear friend, I was a little choked up. Richard Donner passed away, it was like, I made 6 films with this guy. And he started on the script, and I completed it. And he asked me before he went, he said, hey kid, if I drop off the perch, you'll direct this. I said, shut up, you're not going anywhere. He's like, yeah, well, and he did, he passed away. So I've been trying to direct it, and I did a couple of versions of the script with the writer, another Richard. And I think it's the best one of the whole series, but it just won't get made. For some reason or other, I can't even explain why. But Danny's around.
Yeah.
I gotta get Danny. I saw him this morning. It's good to see him.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, because you were talking about directing, you've worked with some fantastic directors throughout your career. Are there any of them that have influenced your directing style?
Well, yeah. Are you kidding? Everybody I've worked with. But even people I haven't worked with, even directors I've watched as a kid in black and white films and stuff, because I was very observant. I think I have a very visual intelligence. It's almost completely visual, and but certainly all the people that I was fortunate enough to work with have influenced me. I mean, there's like Peter Weir and George Miller and Richard Donner and just even Franco Zeffirelli. All these guys, they were like so visual, and what a great school. I mean, I was at the hub of activity through my younger career from about the age of 21 to 35, so I had 15 years of watching how this stuff was done close up. And I remember when I first tried to do it, I was terrified, so I called the tall one. You know who the tall one is? Clint Eastwood, right? I called Clint up, and I sort of confided in him. I said, Clint, I'm going to direct a film. I know you've done a few. He said, I'm scared. And he said, don't worry about it. Once you get up there and start saying action and cut, all the subliminal shit will come out you. And he was right, So it was pretty good, and I really enjoyed it. So I think that's where the most fun is, really, of all the art. It's to be the storyteller and try and put your vision on the screen.
It's wonderful. Now you talk about how you've visually been inspired. You were a huge fan when you were little of Maverick, the TV show, and you'd watch that a lot. And that was one of the things that inspired you, because you love that. Oh yeah, you guys like the show Maverick, of course. And then you were able to film Maverick. Was that a little surreal? Was that kind of like your childhood wish fulfillment to be able to do that role?
Yeah, it was fun. I got to work with Jimmy Garner, you know, he was like amazing. Jimmy had the best jokes. This guy was funny, and most of them are not repeatable. But, you know, hey.
So those are the best kind. So, also...
I can tell you one about, he says, there's this old guy, and the doorbell rings, and he's about 89 years old, and he's on a walker, and they go, ding dong, and he's like, oh, and he grabs his walker, and he sort of gets up to the door. It takes him about 15 minutes, he opens the door, and there's a cake on the doorstep, and he's like, oh, cake, and all of a sudden, the cake explodes, and this girl in a bikini pops out of the top. He says, hi, Herbert, it's your birthday. It's your 84th birthday. Happy birthday. Your friends have all thrown money in the hat, and you and me are going to have super sex. And he goes, I think I'll just have the soup.
Let's switch to that, to Disney. You did, of course, Pocahontas. And it was very interesting. Oh yes, Pocahontas. And it's interesting because a lot of times when they have big name actors that come in and do the voice acting, they'll have like a dub who will do the singing. But you actually did your own singing for Pocahontas.
Well, no, they had to replace parts of me. It was like, it was humiliating. They got some other guy to do the high notes, you know. That's all right.
Is that all right?
Yeah, I don't have too many high notes. You gotta know where your limitations are, right?
And then how do you like doing the voice acting work in the, for the animated films?
Yeah, it's okay. It's kind of an odd thing. You're in a vacuum, really. You're just in a booth with a microphone, and people are telling you, now, at this point, there's a little raccoon that's nibbling on your ear. Now, be amused by that, as you say, you know, I think I left my, I think I left my toothbrush here, you know, whatever you have to say. So, you have to get, you know, yeah, it's a trick. Actually, voice acting is quite tricky and quite difficult. So you know, hats off to those people who do it well.
Excellent. Now, you've had such a sordid career, it's amazing. You've done good guys, you've done bad guys, you've directed. Is there any particular kind of character that you are drawn to, that you like to act on the most? Or how do you choose which projects you like to work on?
They just have to hit you the right way. I think it's important that, you know, the story's kind of compelling. Sometimes I've done stuff and it doesn't work though, you know, it's like, and that happens, you know. Yeah. You do stuff and it kind of flattens out or flatlines, and sometimes it's your fault, but sometimes it's not. And but it's always, you just try and be judicious in what you pick on to do, and get there in as professional and entertaining a way as possible, because you have to do well, you only really have to do one thing.
Yeah.
You have to entertain. If you can entertain and educate, that's better. If you can entertain, educate, and elevate, that's better. And if you can do all three of those things, that's really the best.
I mean, you brought Hamlet to the masses.
Hamster, yeah.
Yeah. Was that a little intimidating to try to do Shakespeare? Were you worried about that at the time?
What? I'm sorry?
Was that a little intimidating to do Shakespeare?
Oh, that's the most intimidating thing you can attempt. And it's really it's Shakespeare, but not only Shakespeare. A lot of the Shakespeares are they're one thing, but then Hamlet is an entirely different thing.
Yeah.
And it's like and I've never really done it because we didn't do it in order.
Oh.
Well, it's on film, so you do like. Sometimes we would do the last part of a long soliloquy, and then we'd do the first 2/3 of that soliloquy a month later. And it's all out of order, so that you don't get a continuous bite at it. So I don't really know what it's like to do Hamlet. We just did it in pieces, in jigsaw puzzle pieces out of order, and then they slapped it together at the end. And, I don't know, kind of, it almost works.
It worked because that was really one of the first mainstream Shakespearean movies, and then a slew of them came afterwards. And you introduced a lot of people to Shakespeare through Hamlet, which is absolutely amazing.
Well, I think what it was clear. I think it was understandable. It was a clear rendering, whereas sometimes it's kind of hard to access.
And then this is a question that was submitted. People want to know. People debate over this. Who would win in a fight, Martin Riggs or William Wallace?
The guy with the bullets.
Fair enough. Have you been having a good time here at FanX so far?
Oh yeah, so far, yeah.
Excellent.
Yes.
You guys?
More wrist exercise than I've gotten in my entire teenage life.
This is Mel Gibson's very first ever comic convention, guys. We are pleased to have you here. For Mel Gibson. This really is the very first one we ever came to. One more time, give a huge round of applause, everybody.